Over a Barrel, the truth about oil, reported by Charles Gibson, continues after this from our ABC stations. Over a Barrel continues.
America uses more oil than it produces, much more. Imported oil accounts for 70% of the American supply, and much of that comes from half a world away.
Most of the world's remaining reserves of oil are in the hands of just 5 countries. Saudi Arabia, which has a quarter of the world's oil reserves, or its 4 immediate neighbors, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE. When you take all that together, that's 2/3 of the world's remaining oil, and it's the world's cheapest and best quality oil.
Is it not in the economic interest of those countries to keep the price of oil low enough that we won't wean ourselves from that fuel?
The Saudis do want to have moderate oil prices because they know that if you kill the goose that lays the golden egg, there goes your own revenues.
Sure, they want to keep us addicted to oil.
Absolutely.
Last summer, when oil prices peaked at $147 a barrel, the U.S. Secretary of Energy at the time went to the King of Saudi Arabia and other members of the OPEC oil cartel, asking them to ramp up production and help bring down the price.
Mr. Secretary, some of your predecessors have wound up going to OPEC almost hand in hand and asking them to increase production. Are we right now at the mercy of foreign oil producers?
Yes, I think so. When a country like the United States depends on oil to really run its engine of industry, we are at mercy on the supplies of oil.
We use a quarter of the world's oil. We have 3% of the world's oil reserves. Are we headed for a train wreck?
We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year importing oil. And so we are heading towards a train wreck, I agree.
And the United States is not only spending billions on Middle Eastern oil, it is also spending billions more on military engagements in the Middle East. The war in Iraq alone, by conservative estimates, has already cost close to $700 billion.
There's no one who'd have any doubt about whether protecting energy sources and access to those sources is one of America's vital interests.
General Wesley Clark is a former Democratic presidential candidate and NATO commander.
In your estimation, the Iraq War was all about oil?
No, it wasn't all about oil. But oil was a component of this.
Well, let me put it a different way. If it wasn't all about oil, if it weren't for oil, from your vantage point, would there have been an Iraq War?
Indirectly, oil was at the foundation of a lot of this. Not just in 2003, but in 1990, 91, it's been the thrust of U.S. policy. And before that, it was the thrust of British policy to safeguard access to that region.
We're not going to get out of Iraq. We cannot allow Iraq to fall into chaos because the chaos threatens the oil.
Bob Baer spent 21 years in the Middle East with the CIA. And he says one of his objectives there was to help ensure continued U.S. access to oil in the region.
It's truly about oil. That's why we have troops in the Middle East. And it's a part of the world we're not going to solve, and it's a part of the world that we're going to have to pay to keep the price of gasoline down by keeping hundreds of thousands of soldiers.
But Baer says, in addition to the problems in Iraq, there are new challenges next door in Iran. Today, Iran has intractable political leaders deeply hostile to America, and the chaos and repression that followed last month's election there has only made things more complicated. U.S. intelligence sources say Iran has missiles trained on Middle Eastern oil facilities to dissuade any attack on Iran's secret weapons programs.
The Iranians are holding the Gulf's oil supply hostage. It's very clear what they're saying. If there's a surgical strike on their nuclear facilities, the Iranians have promised, and there's no reason why I wouldn't believe them, that they're going to hit Saudi Arabia's main oil facilities, Abqaiq, Ras Tanura. They take off 6 million barrels of oil a day off world markets. And I think if you go through the econometrics of this, we can at least talk, we're talking about $250 a barrel.
Do we have our head in the sand about what gas really is costing us?
Let's face it, oil and gas are becoming more of a defining issue in all geopolitical stance. The full costs of using oil have not been folded into what we pay at the pump. You have to begin to fold in the true costs.
We're paying for the geopolitical complications of oil, but we pay through the Pentagon budget, and we pay through the lives of our soldiers lost overseas. These are costs we bear, but because the price isn't made transparent at the pump, we use more gasoline than we should because there's an artificial price.
So it becomes more art than science at that point to try to figure out the true cost of a gallon of gas.
Charlie, I think you've made the most profound point about energy. That is, we don't pay an honest price for the energy we use in America.
Americans make 16 billion stops at a gas station and use 140 billion gallons of gas a year. When Over a Barrel continues.
We can get to energy independence and a greater security for our nation.
And now's when you chant, drill, baby, drill. Yes.
What do you have available to drill? We operate like we have oil because we used to have oil. They were totally uninformed.